Welcome, Tomino listeners, and all of my day ones. This is Let's Talk's Daily Health. Now, our topic for today is common behavioral addictions. Now, most topics covering addictions refer to drugs, alcohol, things of that nature, but not really behavioral addictions are discussed. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, behaviors can be as addicting as substances like alcohol and drugs. Learning which activities can cause serious problems for some people can be very helpful. When most people hear the word addiction, they think of dependence on a substance such as drugs or alcohol. Well, and for good reason, but behavioral addictions are just as relevant. Now, it's a good reason, according to the U.S. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. In 2014, an estimated 21.5 million Americans aged 12 years or older have a significant problem with alcohol or drugs. But alcohol, downers, uppers, and other commonly abused substances aren't the only things Americans abuse or they think they're addicted to. In fact, just substitute the word behavior for substance and well, you've opened up the definition of addiction to all kinds of dependencies, some of which can really surprise you. Whether it's sex, surfing the internet, or bungee jumping, the desire to experience a high becomes so strong that the so-called addict loses control and seeks the activity despite all the negative consequences. Now that definitely sounds like an addiction to me. Let me know. Give me some feedback on what you think. Now, while many experts don't agree on whether they're all true addictions, here are some of the common behavioral addictions. Take, for instance, gambling. Now, that one seems to be a little bit more acceptable as a addiction because it's kind of out in the open. A lot of people lose control in that area, and it's pretty much touched home for a lot of people. Now, constantly bucking your odds of all behavioral addictions, an addiction to gambling is the one that most closely resembles drug and alcohol addiction. The American Psychiatric Association classifies gambling disorder as an addictive disorder. Studies show that gambling addictions light up the same areas of the brain as drug addictions, and treatment for gambling disorder is usually included in the same type of therapy setting as drug and alcohol abuse. The next common is sex addiction. Now, you really don't hear much about sex addiction for many reasons. Perhaps some are in denial of it, some people don't believe in it, and some people just don't talk about it. But it is one that should be discussed more. Now, you occasionally hear about a celebrity going into rehab for sex addiction, but it is an obsessive craving for sex. Is it a real addiction? Perhaps. Though it's not formally classified as an addiction, there are treatments for it, and the APA did consider but reject the idea of adding addictive sexual behavior to the fifth edition of its Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders under the heading of hypersexual behavior disorder. In addition, the symptoms of sex addiction include loss of control, and disregard for risks and consequences, which are very similar to those of traditional addiction. What's sex addict to do? As with drugs, alcohol, and even gambling, hypersexual activity seems to respond best to 12-step programs such as Sex Addicts Anonymous, SAA for short. Now, let's not take that one lightly because that one could be very serious, even deadly, seeing is that there are so many sexually transmitted diseases that there isn't a cure for, only something to deal with the symptoms. And some of them can cause death. So I really think they should include that one. If you guys think so as well, definitely let me know what you think about that and if they should add that one to the Manual of Mental Disorders. Now, the next one, this may touch a little closer to home for a lot of people, internet addiction. Now, it's one that, it's kind of hard to not do it because we live in a world now that's very, technical savvy, if you will. We're living in a weird world, but it is possible to be too plugged in. Now, psychologists and psychiatrists don't generally consider internet addiction a true addiction, but it can be a problem for some people when it involves loss of control, as well as negative consequences, which can arise at work, at home, because there's a time and place for everything, and as with the others that are listed, it can cause a problem. Now, research presented at the 2014 annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association seemed to support the idea of internet addiction by showing changes in the brain identified by neuroimaging. And let's be honest, the web may occupy up to 11 hours out of an internet addict's day. Studies suggest that compulsive internet use affects 6 to 14% of internet users. Now, we even have little children now who have adapted and adjusted and learned to use the internet themselves. So the age range on that's a larger scale. So we definitely want to be careful with that. Sometimes it is good to unplug for a bit, get outdoors, and actually interact face-to-face with people. Now, right now, we are still in the grips of this pandemic, so still keep your social distance, but still talk to people. Still get outside, get some fresh air, and unplug just for a little bit, every day. Now, shopping addiction. Ladies, don't be mad at me. I'm not trying to call y'all out, but for the most part, that's kind of where that I don't know to say begin or perpetuated, but we like to shop. We do. We like to shop. But like everything else, we got to maintain control and the desire as well to shop. Now, shopping is yet another behavior that when it spins out of control is considered to be an impulse control disorder rather than a true addiction. Do you purchase items to avoid feeling sad, but then feel guilty afterwards? Do you have a closet full of clothes that still have the price tag on them? You just might be a shopaholic. Now, studies show that compulsive shopping affects more women than men and that it can result in big problems, both financially as well as personally. So, how do we get help? Treatment for shopping addiction usually involves counseling as well as behavioral therapy. And that could really be a big financial as well as personal issue because You have to pay bills. You have other responsibilities. And when you rather, pardon me, when you rather go shopping versus take care of your financial obligations, that's a very big problem. Not only that, if you're married or in a relationship and you're supposed to be doing things, say 50-50, however it goes in your relationship, that could cause a problem when you're not handling your end because of a shopping addiction. You could lose your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your fiance, your husband. It can even affect just your other relationships like friendships, sibling, because it's kind of stressful having to deal with someone who has a shopping addiction, who's disregarding their obligations, and they're needing help to cover their obligations when they had the funds to begin with. So that can put a really big strain on any relationship. So let's try to keep that shopping down to a minimum. It's always great to treat yourself sometimes, don't get me wrong, but don't go overboard. That way we don't fall in that category, okay? Now, on to the next one. Video game addiction. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, isn't that just for kids? No. There's more adults that play video games than you could possibly imagine. And that's male and female. Now, playing video games can be a great thing when done in moderation. It is a hobby, especially right now considering the pandemic. It could be somewhat of an outlet for a lot of people. Again, when used in moderation. Now, can't get your hands off that game console? Research shows that video game addiction is most common in boys and men. And one study even found that as many as 1 in 10 video players between the ages of 8 and 18 are out of control gamers. And games begin to feel more like reality than fantasy. Now, if you're addicted to your video games, treatments include counseling and behavior modification. Now, as I stated before, there are more adults than is recognized. You have men and some women, because women are not going to be left out. I'm a gamer myself, in moderation. Sometimes you get into those games and you just might be enjoying yourself and lose track of time. And you'll forget to do other things that you were supposed to do that day. But there are others that play the game 20 hours a day. And there are so many games that are designed to keep you immersed in them, which makes it hard to come up off of the game. But there is help. If you know someone or you feel like you have that problem, reach out and contact someone. No shame. Just get you a little bit of help. Now, as far as behavior modification, that will be considered finding some other things to do to use some of that time that you would have spent on the video game. Going for a walk. You could even walk your dog. Use that time reading a book, playing with children. There are many other things that can be done. Or even write a book. Do some DIY projects at home. Anything to use some of that time you would normally spend on the game. And that will help curb some of the desire to spend all day, every day on your video game. Now, moving on to the next one. Plastic surgery addiction. Now, I know for a lot of people, you're probably wondering how in the world could that become an addiction? Well, it can and it does. And to be honest, it's not just celebrities. Now, celebrities tend to be thrust into the spotlight for it. But there are other everyday common Moes, Joes, and Anns that do it. Now, to improve the way they look, some people go under the knife again and again and will again. In fact, people with a desire for plastic surgery may obsessively go from doctor to doctor until they find a plastic surgeon or dermatologist who agrees to treat them. Well, truth is, these people are more likely to have body dysmorphic disorder, BDD for short, than a cosmetic surgery addiction. About 1 to 2% of the population has body dysmorphic disorder. Now that's according to the International OCD Foundation. And the disorder is thought to be many times more prevalent among plastic surgery patients. People with this disorder are preoccupied with their appearance and believe that they are ugly or deformed. I'm going to tell you this. Everyone is good the way they are. Accept yourself for who you are. Now, there are cases to where tragedy strikes and something like car accidents can disfigure a person, or a fire, things of that nature. Then that's more understandable. But once that problem is fixed, you don't run back for more. Acceptance is a huge part of life, and for this one, that seems to be their biggest issue. Now, there's no shame in saying that you need help. So if you fall in that category, know that you are beautiful just the way you are. You are loved, cherished, and needed. And you don't have to keep making these unnecessary changes. Those around you accept you. You just got to accept yourself. And let's not go overboard with that. Now, when it comes to binge eating disorder, it's considered a food addiction. For whatever reason, people have found themselves with this problem. For years, Americans have argued over whether food obsession can actually be food addictions, or whether this disorder is more of an excuse. Now, the truth is, binge eating disorder is a real problem that affects about 3% of adults in the United States. Symptoms include eating to ease emotions, overdoing it on food while alone, and feeling guilty after the binge. The cause of eating disorders is not known, but is probably linked more to depression than addiction. If you feel this way, get help. There's always someone you can call and talk to about these things. We want to see everyone live a happy, healthy lifestyle. No shame in asking for help. If you're depressed, don't eat it. Try to eat it away. Just like you would tell someone not to drink their problems away. Same difference. It's not good for the body. So just get help. And if you know someone, offer your help. Support is a big factor in all of these problems. Now, on to the next one. Risky behavior addiction. Now, I'm pretty sure we all know someone who they're thrill seekers. And for the most part, extreme thrill seekers. Now, simple thrills like going to a theme park and riding a roller coaster every couple of months with the friends or family for an outing, that's not a big deal. But when you go overboard, that is an issue. Because before long, before long, they're going to be seeking a bigger thrill, which means bigger risks, which means even bigger consequences. So we have to be careful there as well. Thrill seekers share many of the same symptoms as drug addicts. They get a rush from, let's say, skydiving or rock climbing, but after a while they seek out even more dangerous adventures to feel the same level of excitement. And studies show that these thrills flood the brain with the same chemicals released by addictive drugs. So what's the bottom line? Not all behavioral addictions meet the classic definition of physical addiction, but they do share many of the psychological and social hallmarks, and they will respond well to traditional types of addiction treatment. So let's do everything in moderation and try to avoid. And if you know someone with any of these behaviors, don't overlook them. They are red flags and need help. So don't judge them, but just try to help them. Be very supportive and love them unconditionally, no matter what happens. You have been listening to Daily Health on the On1 Radio Talk Show podcast station, where daily health is viewed as an ever-changing reality, which we know it is. If you would like to get in contact with On1 Radio Daily Health, you can email on1radiotalk@gmail.com. Place it to the attention, please,